Check this thing out. I don't know how many of you know, but I'm in a band, like a rock band, and we're gonna start playing shows soon. So I got one of those like custom kick drum things. I'm the drummer. I got one of those custom kick drum things so the audience can see our band name on my drum set. Look at this. Look at that. Dear Delta. How sick is that? Anyway, you guys don't care. I care. You don't care. Maybe you care. But anyway, we are here to talk about what happened last week at Hustler. Once in a while, Ryan, who runs Hustler Casino Live, he'll do this thing where we record 2 streams in one day. Doesn't happen very often, but essentially the way it works is one of the streams will be aired live, the other one gets saved for like a few days later. The first stream went really well for me. I won like $120,000 in a 25-50 game. One of my biggest wins. And I think I played quite well, at least by my own standards. After that, we took a 20-minute break and started up stream number 2, and that one was a bigger game. It was either 100-200 or 200-400. I can't quite remember, but it was with some old foes from Hustler. Charles, who you guys might know, and Wesley, another popular player. These guys haven't been around for like a year or something like that, so it was exciting to have them back. It was cool catching up, but the game was shorthanded. It was like 5-handed most of the night. And usually when that's the case, you're going to play a lot of hands, there's going to be a lot of action, and that's exactly what happened. So without any further ado, let's jump into those hands. I'll check in with you guys afterwards. All right, guys, here we go once again. This time we're playing 5100. The 200 quickly came on, so quite the big game. Shorthanded for the most part. I sit down with $50,000 and we get underway. In the first interesting hand, I look down at Ace Queen. There's a limp from Alejandro before Charles raises to 400. I'm in the small blind and I think it's a pretty clear re-raise spot. Nothing out of the ordinary here. I make it 2400. Definitely want to use a bigger size since we're out of position, and also Charles likes to see flops, so I make it 6x his original raise. The limper folds, but Charles sticks around, so we go to a flop heads up, out of position, which looks good to me. It's ace, jack, jack, so we flop top pair, great kicker. Shouldn't be too worried about anything aside from the occasional flop trips or full house. Regardless, I think a small bet is in order, so that's what I do. I throw in 1400. And already this hand gets a little bit weird as Charles puts in the raise in position. He makes it 4,000. Not really sure what's up with this. I'd imagine he should be raising very few hands here, whether they were bluffs or strong hands. And already my spider senses are tingling, and I just got a bad feeling about this one for some reason. I just don't know if he has enough bluffs going on. I mean, maybe he could be turning a hand like King Queen or Queen 10 into a bluff since those are straight draws, but I've got a queen, which makes that a little less likely than it already is. So I decide to just avoid what might be a dangerous situation and let this one go right now on the flop. Maybe a normal fold for you guys out there, but for me, this is pretty much a hero fold. I would almost never make a decision like this, but I was happy to see, since we are playing stand-up, that he turns over trip jacks. So we get away for what I think is the minimum, and it's a good start to the night. Even though we lose this pot and, you know, money goes the other direction, it's a nice confidence boost to start the day. In the next one, I have the double straddle on, maybe the single straddle. I have the 200 on. It gets all the way around to Dylan in the big blind, who makes it 800, and I look down at 4 deuce offsuit. Now this is just not a strong enough hand to play. Even though you should be really wide in the straddle defending, I think this is just way too bad. Probably fold like 90% of the time, and maybe once in a while try to put in the re-raise and take it down pre-flop. But I make the biggest mistake of all and just call. This is just bad, but at the bare minimum, it's against Dylan, and I'm happy to give this man action pretty much at all times. Off to a flop, which comes down ace, queen, deuce with 2 diamonds. So we've got bottom pair and a very optimistic backdoor straight and flush draw. Dylan checks though, so I'm happy to see the free turn card. When the 5 of diamonds comes out, well, now we've got a straight draw and a flush draw. So as Dylan bets $1,000, I don't think I have the best hand, but sticking around might be worthwhile since we might be able to turn our hand into a bluff or of course improve on certain rivers. Little did I know he's got the king of diamonds, so we're drawing pretty thin as I toss in the 1,000, but the river bails us out. It's the 4 of clubs, giving me a super disguised 2 pair. What's a bit odd is Dylan continues betting now for 2,000. I guess it kind of makes sense. Maybe he's trying to get value from a worse pair than his kings. But of course, with 2 pair, we're going to be putting in the raise. It is a little bit thin since there are flushes and straights available. Not necessarily because I think he's going to have one of those, but more so because it's tough to get called by worse with a hand like bottom 2 pair on a board like this. But I'm going to try. If we get re-raised, I'll probably just fold. I make it 5,500 to go. Dylan does not seem to love it, but after a bit of thought, he makes the call. Can't really blame him with the king of diamonds. You know, he wants to make sure he's not getting bluffed, but unfortunately for him this time, we did get lucky on the river and we take down this pot. Next, this hand goes down where I am once again in the 200 straddle. There's a limp from Alejandro, Charles, and Dylan. I, of course, just check with 7-4 offsuit. So 4 ways to a limped pot here at Hustler Casino Live, playing 51-2. What else is new? We'll go to a board of King, King, Jack. Not much going on for me, so I check it, and the action checks all the way around. Turn card is another Jack, and I feel like most likely someone would have bet a Jack or a King on the flop. Maybe not a King every time, but at least a Jack. So I decided to take a stab at this one, thinking to myself, no one is too strong. I put in $400. Could get away with a cheap bluff here. Alejandro makes the call. The other players fold. That's not looking great. River comes down the 4 of diamonds, and of course now we are just playing the board. Well, actually, that's not technically true. I've got 7 high, so we've got kings and jacks, 7 kicker. Not a good hand. A bluff is probably in order, just to try to fold out straight draws or flush draws. However, I've played with him enough to know that whenever he misses draws or senses weakness, he usually takes a stab at the pot. And because I don't think he has a full house, I decide to check this one over, let him bet, and then check raise as a bluff, trying to get him off whatever he might be betting. And of course, make a little more money that way. Super risky because what if he just gives up and checks back with like 10 high, right? I look like a complete idiot. But fancy play syndrome is in order here. I check it, and sure enough, Alejandro does put in a bet of $1,000, a little over half pot. And I decide, of course, to stick to the plan. I check raise to $3,000. No need to use a huge sizing since I'm just trying to fold out hands like exactly queen 9 offsuit, which is what he's got here. Queen 10, maybe ace 10 off, whatever. These random hands that float the turn and don't improve on the river. He doesn't make the snap call, so I don't think he has a jack. He doesn't raise, at least not right away, so I'm discounting a king. But he doesn't fold right away either, so now I'm really wondering what is going on. Did he really bet this river with ace high as a bluff and now is contemplating a hero call? Well, then he says he has queen high, so I'm feeling better about it. And after a minute or two, he does fold. Again, not a huge pot, but this one felt pretty nice to figure out and eventually take down. We profit like $2,100 in the process. All right, in this next one, I raise it up with 5-4 suited to $500. Charles calls in the small blind, and then Dylan puts in the re-raise from the big blind to $2,500. Back to me now, and yeah, we have position and a playable hand, you could argue, but small suited gappers like these are just not great. I think maybe 7-6 suited or 8-7 suited we can start to call, but should probably fold this 5 high. I don't do that, however. A little bit of a pre-flop mistake, you could argue, but I make the call. Charles gets out of the way, so we go heads up to a flop of 10-9 deuce with 2 clubs. Dylan checks it over to me, which I think is often going to indicate a hand like this, ace high, or just something that doesn't love this flop. I, of course, have a flush draw, so I'm going to bet. Don't need to bet huge here. I would bet a lot of hands for protection, like any pocket pair, a 10, a 9, maybe even like ace deuce suited. All these hands would bet around a third pot, I think, so that's what I do with a 5 high flush draw. Dylan makes the call though, and we see the king of spades on the turn, which is not a great card for me. I decide to check this one back. And then the river is bad to worse as it's the ace of diamonds. So we completely miss our flush and we're stuck here with 5 high. Dylan now bets out, and of course I am not going to try anything fancy now that the board favors him a lot more than me. So I just let this one go. We got a little unlucky after having flopped a straight and flush draw to, completely miss all the outs. But at least we don't lose a ton of money. Next, this hand goes down where I am in the double straddle for $400. I think we've officially changed the game to 1-2 now, so The straddle is 400. I guess it's not a double straddle. Anyway, Wesley raises it up on the button to 1,000. I defend with 9-7 suited. We go to a board of ace, queen, 7 with 1 club. Interesting flop here, as it's generally going to favor the pre-flop raiser a bit more, but we do have bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw. I check it over to him and he puts in a bet of $800. Considering that Wesley opened the button and we're 5-handed, this could be so many different hands that I think occasionally check raising is okay here. The problem is, even though we are going to be doing it with hands like pocket 7s, queen 7, ace 7, all these sorts of strong holdings, we got to balance it with some bluffs, and I think bottom pair with backdoor flush draw is a great candidate to do that with. So I make it 2,400 after he bets 800. Wesley makes the call, which I think indicates he was not just stabbing with complete air like 8-6 suited on this board, and we're off to a turn which is the 5 of hearts. Now I'm still representing a set or 2 pair, so I think a big bet is in order here. I make it $7,000, trying to get a fold from a queen, maybe a stronger 7, maybe even an ace might fold once in a blue moon, though I doubt it, but I wouldn't be too surprised if he decided to just ditch ace-deuce suited. However, Wesley has turned a flush draw to go along with his medium strength pair, so of course he is not going to go anywhere. He makes the call, and after he makes this call, I think it's most likely he's got something strong. I mean, at the end of the day, he could, even though he raised the button pre-flop, he could have those hands like pocket aces, ace queen, pocket queens, maybe even ace king, which of course is now top 2. So on a run out like this, I don't know. I think another bluff here would have been the best play, but I thought to myself there were more strong hands than weak ones at this point that he could have, so I decided to just kind of give up and check it. He instantly checks back, and it's quite frustrating to see that he had one of those few hands that would have folded the river, at least I think. Medium strength pair, turns a flush draw, and then misses. I guess it's always easier when you could see the cards afterwards, but I kind of wish I would have unloaded one final bet in this hand. Didn't play this one super well, but anyway, we move along to this next one where there's a raise to 600 from Charles. Dylan makes the call in the small blind, and I am in the big blind with 6-4 offsuit. Not really strong enough to defend, but I want to play pots with Charles and Dylan, mainly because these guys are here for fun, they're giving action, and I don't just want to be a nit and stick to good hands only. So I come along with 6-4 offsuit, and I get instantly rewarded as it comes down 8-7-5 rainbow. We flopped the joint. Well, I guess we do lose to 9-6, but can't be too scared of monsters under the bed. This is a great situation. Dylan checks. I almost lead out on this one since it's going to favor the blind more than the pre-flop raiser, but I decided to check it, and Charles checks back. Turn card doesn't change anything. It's the 3 of clubs. Dylan checks again, and of course I gotta bet this straight at one point, so I make it 2,200. Charles folds. Dylan comes along, so at least we're getting some action. Of course, as you guys can see, this is a disaster. Dylan flopped the nuts with 9-6, and he played it super sneaky. He checked the flop, he checked the turn, and once he finally got a bet out of me, he didn't even check raise. So when the river comes to deuce of hearts, I am just loving life here. Dylan checks again, and it's just a question of how much value do we want to go for. I decided to bet around pot, $7,000, and this is where Dylan gives me the bad news with the old check raise all in on the river. The thing is, we even beat some value hands at this point, like smaller straights. He could also be bluffing with a hand like 7-6 suited. He could be check raising like ace-4 that got there on the river. Just all sorts of stuff that, of course, we beat. If he has 9-6, 1, he has to have played it this way, which I don't think is going to happen too often. And 2, I mean, I've got a 6, so, you know, what are the chances? I can't be folding the second nuts in this situation, is what I'm trying to say. So I make the call, and we get the bad news. Dylan does have 9-6 of diamonds, which, even though I thought might be happening, I was still surprised to see him turn over those cards. I mean, that is just some crazy bad luck. We lose this $67,000 pot, biggest one of the night for me so far, and it is going the wrong direction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the fireworks of today's session, the main event, if you will. Here we go. In this one, I look down at 7-6 suited. We're playing 100, 200. I make it 500 to go. Charles now re-raises from the big blind. He makes it 2,000. Not a huge raise. Back to me with 7-6 suited, and I think a little bit of re-raising is completely fine since we are shorthanded. This will give us some board coverage in 4-bet pots. We also balance the times we have aces and kings and all that good stuff. So I think a raise is completely okay. Call is standard. I think that's probably the more popular play, but this time I decide to take the aggressive route and put in a raise. I make it 5,500 to go. We're pretty deep and we have position, so I like my chances in this situation. So I make it 5,500, like I said. Charles makes the call, and we go to a flop of 8-4-3 with 2 hearts. We've got a straight draw, not much else aside from that. It's a pretty bad board for me. One thing to note here before we proceed, I had been re-raising Charles relentlessly up to this point, and I was getting the feeling that he's kind of sick of me. So when he made the call pre-flop, I was like, yeah, this guy's had enough. Anyway, so we go to this flop, and after he checks to me, I don't really want to down bet this kind of board. There's some draws available. I think if I had overpairs, I would size up a little bit as well. So I go around 2/3 here, 8,000 into the middle. And now Charles thinks for a bit before putting in this weird check raise to 25,000. I don't really understand this because I could have aces, I could have kings, whereas he would almost never have those hands after just calling pre-flop out of position. Would he really play queens this way? I don't know. And if he had pocket eights, which is top set, wouldn't he want to trap? This raise doesn't really make much sense to me. And paired with the fact that, like I said, I thought he had had enough and was ready to take a stand, I got the vibe that he was just getting out of line with like Jack 10 suited or Ace 10 of diamonds, maybe Ace 5 suited. That's, you know, a straight draw on this flop. I don't know why, guys. My gut, my instinct was just telling me that we could get away with murder here against this check raise. Now, as you guys can see, that is just wrong. Charles actually has the nut flush draw, which I would argue it's kind of weird to raise with that hand, but the man has style. You know, he doesn't play the conventional way. He does whatever the hell he wants, and who can really blame him? I mean, Charles is pretty much a legend here at Hustler Casino Live, so I am by no means arguing with this man's strategy. All I'm trying to say is I did not expect him to have this kind of hand. I thought mostly he was full of shit. So I did what any rational man does when he's going up against a $25,000 raise that he thinks is complete nonsense. I shove all in for 90K, pretending I have an overpair and trying to get him to fold jack high or ace high or whatever the hell. Now this is where the bad news comes in, as Charles says, all right, I call. At this point, you know, my heart starts racing a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? What am I doing? This is a clear example of just being a little bit too confident, thinking you can walk all over the other players. It's obviously not the case. Charles is not afraid of getting all the money in with just a flush draw and 2 overs. And, you know, really it makes sense. It's a pretty damn good hand. So we run it twice. We're looking for a 7, a 6, or a 5 that's not a heart. Of course, a 7 or a 6 that are also not hearts. So yeah, we're not looking good, like 20% to win, but at least we're running it twice, which is nice. You know, we have some choppability going on. However, the first board brings a king, and the second board has a heart. So yeah, we're completely drawing dead, regardless what that second river is. And yeah, that is the story of how I lost this $190,000 pot to Charles. Completely unnecessarily, you could argue, but you know, I try to give you guys the insight into my thought process. You could say that's a terrible thought process, and it would be tough to, you know, say much against that. But that's just what was going through my mind. I usually play with a combination of what I think is some sound theory plus gut feeling, and sometimes things just don't work out, and this is by far a huge highlight to showcase when things don't work out. This is how you lose a bunch of money with 7 high for no apparent reason. But the night goes on. There was 1 or 2 more hands headed my way tonight, so stay tuned for some more action. Here we go. In this next one, I make it 500 with ace 7 off. Probably like the worst hand I would raise in this position, but I think now we're 4-handed, so probably okay. Dylan defends the big blind, and we go to a flop of 9-5-3 with 2 diamonds. He checks, I bet small, 600. He makes the call, and we improve on the turn. It's the ace of spades. Dylan checks again, and considering that there are many draws available and I would have a plethora of bluffs now, I think an overbet is in order, so that's what I do. I bet around a pot and a half, $3,600. Dylan seems to not believe anything I'm selling at this point and makes the call, which I think is good news, unless of course he floated the flop with a better ace, which is going to happen sometimes, but for the most part, I think we're getting some sick value here. River card is an offsuit 7, so we improve to top 2 pair. Somehow, if we were up against a stronger ace, this is the complete dream now. Dylan checks again, and unfortunately, he actually has a flush draw, so it doesn't really matter how much I bet here. He's probably not going to call with king high. And yeah, he lets it go right away. So we don't win a ton in this one. Kind of how it goes on rough nights. When you have big hands, you don't get paid. When you have bad hands, the pot is huge. I'm doing it to myself a little bit, but you know, slight run bad as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last hand of today's stream. Now, this is a weird one. I raised it up on the button to $1,200. There must have been a straddle on, or maybe the blinds are bigger now or something. But anyway, I make it $1,200 and only Charles calls from the big blind. Off to a board of Jack 10 deuce, we've got bottom pair, and that seems pretty cool because it's hard to make a pair. So I decide to bet after he checks to me. I make it 800. Charles makes the call, and we see a nice turn card. It's the 4 of hearts, giving me a very undeserving 2 pair, and it's pretty disguised as well. So we're going to get some value from any jack or maybe even a 10 that is just not really sold at this point. So when Charles checks the turn, of course, I'm going to continue putting chips in there. I make it $4,200. Charles makes the call again, and we go to a river, which is the 5 of diamonds. It's pretty much a blank unless he has jack 5, I guess, or maybe 10-5. But aside from that, this is great. We have a clean run out. No jack should improve to trips. No straight draws really get there. We're in business here, guys. He checks it again, and I go for a big bet. Now, time to give you guys a little more backstory. After that 7-6 of clubs hand versus Charles, we had been joking back and forth that he was going to give me a double up as a thank you for the donation, if you will. I had been teasing him that he's not going to give me a double up. He's saying the same thing. You know, we're kind of going back and forth, and I'm kind of like poking and prodding him to give me some light action. So when I actually have it here and I decide to bet $16,000, I am just loving this. Charles is going to call me with any jack or a 10. He might even turn his hand into a bluff if he's got like 10-6 or whatever the hell Charles could have. Like I said earlier, this guy is not afraid to play any 2 cards. But then when he immediately check raises all in for my remaining 50K, it kind of sucks because what do we beat now? I mean, yeah, you could argue we beat hands like 9-8 or Queen 9, which are missed straight draws, but would he really turn those hands into bluffs on the river? I mean, yeah, he did make some jokes about giving me action, and it is Charles, but even this man would have to be a complete kamikaze warrior to just punt with Queen high or 9 high for no reason. He might also have a jack, but most people would just snap call with a jack instead of trying to turn it into some fancy bluff. So I kind of discount that right away. Now, could he be doing this with a 10? Yeah, I think it's possible. Would he be doing this with 2 pair? Even then, I don't think he would. Like if he had 10-5 or 4-5, for example, he might just call. So yeah, this is a really what you call polarizing raise all in from Charles. What kind of straights or sets would play this way? I feel like if he had pocket deuces, pocket 4s, or jack 10, he would have check raised on the flop or the turn. So really it just comes down to, does he have jack 5? Or the one other hand I was worried about was ace 3 of hearts. That one kind of makes sense because he would have had to float the flop with that, which I think is okay. I guess it's reasonable. Then he turns the dream, right? He's got a straight and flush draw to go with it. And then he misses his flush draw, but he makes the wheel on the end, right? With the 5. That was the one hand. I even said it out loud while I was thinking. I was like, do you have ace 3 or hearts? Of course, Charles does not give me anything here. He's just a statue. But I don't know. In the end, I thought there was just not enough value going on here. And I have a pretty sweet hand myself. 2 pair is a nice bluff catcher because we have removal to sets and other 2 pairs. So I figured it's more likely he's just bluffing and trying to get me off of whatever I might have, like ace high or something. In the end, I decided to make the call. You could argue a little bit of frustration went into this decision, but I'm not sure. I feel like even if I was up $1 million and feeling 0 tilt, I might have made this call as well. Of course, it's just more run bad as Charles actually does have that one hand that I was worried about. Ace 3 of hearts, which by the way, I even thought might re-raise pre-flop, at least at some frequency. I mean, he's facing a raise from the button and he's got a small suited ace. Come on, sometimes he's going to re-raise that hand, right? But nope, this time the stars align for him to win this massive pot. And of course, the board just comes out in this way where I'm kind of just doomed unless I make the hero fold at the end, which unfortunately I was not capable of doing. You could say that I should have been able to fold my hand here, but I was unable to do it, and we lose this massive pot to Charles once again. At this point, pretty much all my money has gone to him. And sadly, the stream ended a few minutes after this. So, complete disaster here at Hustler Casino Live. At least it went to a good guy, but yeah, not my best night. Stay tuned for some final thoughts and, of course, to hear my results. Yeah, so as you guys saw, not my proudest moment at Hustler Casino Live, which is gonna happen. You know, you play there once a week for like 2 or 3 years. It's like anything else, you know. Athletes have bad games. Well, I'm not gonna go down the list of analogies, but you get the idea. Not every day is gonna be like a superstar day, and you're definitely gonna have your opposite of superstar days, and that's what happened with me that stream. At least I ran really bad. Of course, I played terrible. I think that 6-7 of clubs hand was the biggest punt I've ever had in my life. Probably one of the worst played hands of my entire life. And I want to talk a little bit about why that happened and my thoughts on it, because it's easy to just look at that hand and be like, oh, that's awful, you suck. But there's usually more to it when hands like that happen. At least for me, that hand, in my opinion, happened because of something I struggle with a lot and something that's been a problem for me since I pretty much started playing poker, which is that I get overconfident sometimes. The last couple of weeks, things have really gone my way. And on this day, as you guys saw from the first couple hands, I put in that check raise on the double paired board as a bluff. And then I had that fold against Charles on the ace, jack, jack when I had ace, queen. And I'm like, no one else is folding that. Like, I'm the shit. Now, of course, all these thoughts are helpful because they help you, you know, be confident while you play. But aside from that, it can be quite detrimental if you start to think you're better than you are, which of course is true, because while I think I'm good at poker, I'm definitely not like a top elite player or something like that. At least I don't think I am. There's a lot of room for growth. So yeah, when you get overconfident like that, these things could happen and you start to feel like you can just get away with anything. And the only way that you lose is if you get coolered, but no one's outplaying me. No one like can touch me. And I start to have these thoughts, and it's not great, you know? So maybe it's from this like competitive background I've always had my whole life. I grew up playing competitive sports. I played soccer in college. I always took video games too seriously. Like when I would play Halo online, I would always try to win, never for fun, you know? Because to me, winning is what's fun. Like, I don't really care to play just to like play. Sometimes it's fine, but for the most part, I'm a really competitive person, and I take things that I spend a lot of time doing, I take them very seriously, and I want them to go well, and I want to find success. And it's a double-edged sword because it's put me in positions that I think are good for my life, and it's definitely helped, but it's also hurt a lot. And this hand is an example of that. You know, you get too competitive, you get, you know, way too much confidence in your head. You start to think that nothing can touch you, and then it all comes crashing down by, you know, punting what was it, $80,000-$90,000 to Charles with 7 high just for no reason. Probably a bit of tilt too, of course. So yeah, what to say about it? I have to learn to check myself with confidence, and I think the same can be said when you're running bad. You have to remain confident enough that you're a winning player, or you can, you know, turn it around at least. Yeah, that's it. I don't know why I'm sharing all this with you guys, but I get a lot of messages like, oh, how do you deal with tilt? Or how did you get so good? And all this shit. And like, really, at the end of the day, I'm not super good and I'm not that bad. I'm just kind of like, you know, above average. And that's what my graph will show over time. And that's what my results, I think, reflect over time. So got to stay level-headed when things are going really bad or when things are going really good. And I did not do a good job of that. I know I don't really do these rants too often, so I hope they're not annoying you guys. But if it is bothering you, that's too bad. It's my channel. Sorry. But, you know, I just wanted to share my thoughts a little more than I normally do. I'm usually just like, yeah, that went great. All right, see you guys next time. Or, oh, I lost. See you guys next time. But today I wanted to open up a little more for some reason. I don't know why. But if you guys are into it, let me know down in the comments. I lost like 200K during that session. So despite having won over 100 earlier during the first stream, I gave it all back and then some during the second stream, which was brutal. Like, I drove home in a not good mood at all. But life goes on, and yeah, what to do? Nothing, just try to learn from it, move forward, play better, work harder, be more disciplined, all that stuff, which is what I'm going to try to do. Whether or not I'll succeed, you will have to subscribe and stay tuned. And also stay tuned to Dear Delta, my band. We have music out, by the way. If you haven't heard it, here is some information. Here's the warm-up. This is our first EP. It's out on Spotify, Apple Music, title everywhere, pretty much, if you want to listen to it. And yeah, like I said, we're going to be playing some shows coming up soon. I don't know how many of you guys are going to be interested in, like, you know, paying $20 to come watch a live rock band. To me, that sounds super fun, but I know that, you know, a lot of people aren't into live music and even much less into like rock music. But if that happens to be you, please leave a comment down below, because I'm trying to see whether or not I should offer tickets on YouTube, like, you know, put a link down below when we start to sell tickets to our shows, or if I should just like keep that stuff separate. I don't really know. You guys will let me know. That's enough talking. I am so sorry this has gone on so long. I try to make my videos short and concise, but like I said, for whatever reason, I felt like venting to you guys today. But that's all I got. As always, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for the support. Let's hope the year goes a little better for the remaining like 2 months. And of course, at the end of the year, I will let you guys know my bottom line, results-wise for poker. So anyway, that's it. Get out of here. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, good luck at your local tables. Peace.